He got thrown off. Yeah. Got it on my list. But...
More noses?
Glad you guys got a chance to.
Thought about two of them.
I'll hear about them during the break.
No, I am not a.
Good afternoon. I would like to open the floor for our public hearing this evening. The Tompkins County Legislature will hold the following public hearing in the legislature chambers at 5:30 concerning proposed local law number D of 2022, amending Chapter 28 of the Tompkins County Charter and Code. Proposed local law available upon request. We have one speaker that is signed up this evening, and that is Robert Lynch.
Good evening. Robert Lynch, 175 Gray Road, Town of Enfield, member of the Enfield Town Board. And I'm here representing the Enfield Town Board, which is supportive of the plan redistricting of the Tompkins County Legislature that is before you for this public hearing. We're not going to get into the question of whether there should be a 16-member legislature or a 15-member or a 14 or a 13 size, whether it's an odd number or even number. We're not going to get into that. I'm just saying the way that this redistricting commission worked in dividing the town of Enfield between two and no more than two legislative districts, we can be satisfied with. For a number of decades, we've been divided between two legislative districts, and the plan that is before you tonight will essentially keep things pretty much the way they are. A few blocks, rural blocks, will be moved from one district to another, but we can be satisfied with that. And I just wanted to say that the redistricting commission did a heck of a job. They did a thorough job. They went through all kinds of scenarios to come up with a plan that they are proposing and is before this hearing tonight. And I urge you to give it serious consideration. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lynch. Next, I would like to close the public hearing. I'd like to welcome everyone to our Tompkins County Legislature meeting this evening. It is Tuesday, August 16th, and the time is 5:32. If you'll join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. If we could have a roll call of members.
Randy Brown.
Here.
Amanda Champion is asked to be excused. Deborah Dawson.
Here.
Henry Granison.
Here.
Rich John.
Here.
Dan Klein.
Here.
Ann Corman.
Here.
Mike Lane.
Here.
Greg Mezzi.
Here.
Veronica Pillar.
Here.
Lee Shirtliff.
Here.
Mike Sigler.
Here.
Travis Brooks.
Here.
Shauna Black.
Here.
We have 13 members present.
Thank you. This evening, we will not have proclamations, petitions, or communications and notices. And we will have an executive session that is dealing with contract negotiations. We are not expected to take action. Now let's open it up for privilege of the floor. And it's the public's turn. First, we have Martha Fisher.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for listening to me, and thank you for your service. I very much appreciate what you're doing. I don't think I could do it. I wanted to speak to the use of the opioid settlement funds and maybe share with you an experience that I've had over the past 6-7 months with a youngster whose mother passed away because of an overdose on opioids. she and her younger sister lived with their mom, who was addicted for the previous 4 years. So she was pretty literally not a mother to those two girls. And this youngster who she moved in with us just before Christmas, because her great aunt had taken her and her younger sister and her Down syndrome aunt into her home, a very small home. So there were 5 people in a very small, poor home. They didn't have a car. They still don't have a car. I helped them a lot with transportation. The youngster who lives with us has graduated from high school, and I really appreciate Ithaca High School's support of her as she caught up on schoolwork after having tried living with her father, who's an absent father who lives down in Delaware and who failed utterly in his attempt to be a parent to this young one. I've watched both girls deal with trauma, and I've come to understand that trauma, when it's occurred at the young age of 5 years old, which was how old the youngest child was, that trauma is organic to her brain now. And she lives with great aunt, and life is hell in that house because this youngster has no outlet for how much anger is in her. And so I'm hoping that, and for our youngster, who's now 18, and she's about to go off to Monroe Community College, knock on wood, and all of our fingers crossed. She deals with so much anxiety and self-doubt, and she has a very shaky support system at best. I want to encourage you all to do your best to allocate those monies as much as you can to the support services for children of people who have died from opioid addiction. And I mean really direct services for transportation. This youngster is out in Enfield with no car. Oh.
Go ahead. Finish up. Yeah.
Okay, good. She is getting services through Family and Children's, through DSS, both of which don't have a whole lot of money. They need a pocket of money earmarked for services for the offspring of people who have passed on because of the opioid epidemic. Those damn opioid companies, they need to pay up, and they need to give it right to the people who need it the most. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Fisher, for coming in tonight. Next is Zachary Nguyen.
Good evening. My name is Zachary Nguyen. I sent a message to the legislature with a couple of links to my website, ithacacrime.com, relevant to my statement here. There is a major situation brewing in the area around 7-Eleven, Sunoco, A+ gas station, and the parking lot of the Hotel Ithaca. Recently, a delivery driver was attacked at random right across the street. The individual responsible was likely high on methamphetamine. And Hotel Ithaca and 7-Eleven management are aware of the issues. 7-Eleven specifically is requesting police assistance, but not arrests. So here we go.
Drive by 7-Eleven. Apparently have people knocking on windows of vehicles that are at the pump and reports of drug use behind the building. They're not looking for anything other than an officer to make a presence there.
There we go. This lack of response only reinforces antisocial behavior. The message being that you will not be arrested for using drugs in public only encourages the behavior. And I have personally witnessed someone smoking crack in front of the Tompkins County Public Library on a city street in broad daylight at 2 in the afternoon. Whatever the merits of the Tides proposal, more immediate action is required. Other counties are telling their drug addicted and mentally ill to come to Ithaca. And with students back, there is a whole new population of potential victims. Mentally ill people deserve more than being ignored while they die of overdoses in the jungle. The city of Ithaca is obviously not prepared to act. It is city policies that have created this situation, and the police have their hands tied. I believe it falls on this body to attempt to address the situation in Ithaca relating to drug addiction, mental illness, and homelessness. Allowing this issue to fester unaddressed is costing lives and ruining the quality of life in the city. I yield the remainder of my time. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Nguyen.
Could I ask you a question?
Sure.
Mr. Nguyen, you said you'd sent something to the legislature?
I think I received it.
Okay. Thank you.
Zachary, your website is ithacacrime.com. Okay. Next is Ruth Yarrow.
Good evening. I'm Ruth Yarrow. I live at 224 Cleveland Avenue in Ithaca. I'm the vice chair of the Human Rights Commission for the county. And I'm here to express appreciation to members of this body that are writing in to express their concern about what's happening with the Cayuga people, the Cayuga Nation. I've been up there to Seneca Falls. I've seen the destruction that Clint Halftown has perpetrated on the buildings that people from the traditional nation live in and where they've had their ceremonies. Huge bulldozer comes in and just destroys the building while it's being surrounded by police that Clint Halftown has paid. This is not acceptable situation. I realize it's not in our county, but we live on the Cayuga territory. So I'm very appreciative of people in this, members of this body that will write to the Bureau of Indian Affairs and make it clear that someone that does this to their fellow members of that nation should not be the representative of the nation. And it's a matter of serious human rights right here on our doorstep. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Is there anyone else here that would like to speak on public privilege of the floor? Do we have anyone that's signed up online? Okay. Let's move on to municipal officials.
Real quick, we have Annika Rowland. Is that someone who signed up for public comment?
Yes.
Okay.
Hi, Annika. Would you like to speak this evening?
Hi, yes. Thank you for allowing me to speak today. My name is Annika Rowland, and I am a part of the Free Tcap campaign here in Ithaca as part of the Ithaca Democratic Socialists of America. And I am here to talk about why Tompkins County should transition to fare free Tcap. Firstly, transportation in Tompkins County should be free to all residents to reduce the effects of vehicle emissions on our changing climate and deliver equity to all. Making Tcap free would encourage more people to ride the bus, foregoing personal vehicles, which are a huge fossil fuel emitter. As we all know, climate change is already disrupting our local food system and impacting people's livelihoods here. And so free transportation would significantly reduce this. Additionally, going fare free would allow many residents who otherwise would not have the means to travel to work, home, or leisure. What's more, the TCAP board is currently on the verge of spending upwards of $1 million on a new fare box system, which would delay the implementation of a fare-free system for several years. So this decision of going fare-free must be made now. That $1 million could instead be put into essential services such as higher pay for TCAT riders. Higher pay for TCAT drivers, or expanded service for those who need transportation at odd hours of the day, such as the many service workers that we have here in Ithaca. The board would have the ability to hire more drivers to fill critical service gaps, which have been spoken about extensively at other legislative meetings and were highlighted in an Ithaca Voice article written today by Jimmy Jordan. I urge you all to go look at that article. Please consider the amount of benefits that going fare-free would lead to for the Tompkins County. And I encourage you to look at many other examples of college towns who have done the exact same thing, including Chapel Hill in North Carolina, Corvallis, Oregon, and Albuquerque, New Mexico. Thank you, and I forfeit the rest of my time.
Thank you, Annika. Anyone else here for public privilege of the floor? Okay. Next, municipal officials. Mr. Lynch?
Good evening. Robert Lynch, councilperson, town of Enfield. I'm here just to give you an update on some things that we have done recently on the Enfield Town Board, one in particular. And it's an item that you will have brought to your attention tonight because Jay Franklin, our assessment director, will talk to you about a new state bill that I hope becomes a state law. It's Senate Bill 9131 and Assembly Bill 10155A. And you'll recall back in April, I came before your legislature and urged you to adopt home rule legislation, which would then go to the state to be adopted, which would permit municipalities such as the town of Enfield or Tompkins County to grant up to a 10% reduction in property assessments, residential property assessments, to volunteer firefighters and EMS personnel who serve in that particular jurisdiction. We thought that it would take local home rule legislation to do that. As it happened, after I talked to your legislature in May, the New York State Assembly and Senate passed unanimously legislation that would allow that opportunity for municipalities statewide. And those are the bills that I mentioned to you. They were passed without opposition in either house, and they've been put before the governor. And as yet, as of this afternoon, she has not yet signed them. We on the Enfield Town Board last Wednesday adopted a resolution that, in my words, would give Governor Hochul a little bit of a nudge and encourage her to sign those bills into law because they would help our volunteer firefighter and EMS staff. If she does not do that in the next couple of weeks, I may come before the appropriate committee or this full legislature and urge that you as a legislature do like we in Enfield did and adopt that kind of nudge that would encourage the governor's signature. I'll keep you advised of whether that signature comes or not. I check every day. I will mention a public speaker here earlier this evening talked about the Cayuga Nation and some of the problems up there. We as a board did not take any action on that this past week. However, two of our members did speak under our board's privilege of the floor to encourage that something be done up there to allow more justice. And I'll leave that point there. And that's what I have to report tonight. Any questions? Yes, Mike. The new salt barn? It's just about done. We have a state grant that was awarded a couple of years ago, and it provides about half the cost of what's turned out to be a $765,000 salt barn We're going to bond $750,000. We found that the floor was going to cost a little more than we thought. We made the final appropriations this past Wednesday. I think it's about $50,000 to put asphalt on the floor, another $15,000 or so to put the electricity in there, and it's pretty much done. We haven't had a walkthrough. We haven't had a ribbon cutting yet, but I'm sure we'll keep you apprised of that. But everything's gone well. And the nicest thing is two things. Number one, our town board has never disagreed over doing it. We have had total unanimous agreement on it. And number two, the constituents are 100% behind it. I have not heard one complaint from anybody in the community. So that is a good news story. We are moving forward. Anything else? Thank you.
Any other questions for Mr. Lynch? Okay, thank you. Any other municipal officials signed on today, Dominic?
Not seen anyone yet. We had some city people sign up, but I don't see them.
Okay, if they come late, we can always bring them back. Next, it is privilege of the floor for legislators. Dan Klein.
Couple of quick Tcat updates. One is, we keep hearing about the free Tcat campaign. Just want to let you know that Tcat did initiate a committee to be looking into this. We've met once. We'll be meeting once a month. I will not update you every month, but if anybody wants to hear where we're at with it, you feel free to contact me. And then the other thing about Tcat is some good news that just got announced today, which is Tcat won an $8.7 million grant for additional electric buses. This came from the federal infrastructure bill. And as I said, they'll all be electric buses. And we think that'll get us 4 big buses and 6 little buses. Did I have that right? 6 big buses and 4 little buses. So that's good news. It's going to take a couple of years probably to get them because that's how long it takes normally. Plus everyone in the world suddenly wants electric buses. So that's all good news. Thank you.
Thank you, Dan. I have Veronica and then Mike Sigler.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I want to talk a little bit about the situation with the Cayuga people and thank at least one member of the public for coming, or a couple members of the public for coming to speak about that. I'll try to keep it brief. For those who don't know, before any European settlers got here, Indigenous folks lived on these lands in the place where we are meeting in downtown Ithaca. And in all of Tompkins County, it was the Cayuga Nation, otherwise known in their language as the Cayuga. And dating, they say they've lived here since time immemorial. There's no record of them not having been here in any kind of recorded history. Their traditional government model, long before the US was established, is one of chosen leaders who make consensus-based decisions. And I'd like to thank actually one of their chiefs called Sachem Sam George, for meeting with a few of us legislators earlier this morning and clarifying some of this. The way their leadership works is their nation is composed of several clans. Each clan has its own clan mothers, which is a title belonging to an elder woman that's passed down hereditarily, and the clan mothers choose sachems, responsible men to make decisions for their clan with others from the nation. Those decisions are consensus based. It's democracy, but not in an electoral way, the way we do it. And sachems serve for life unless they are not following the Great Law of Peace, the way in which the Cayuga live and govern, as I understand it. And if they're not following that, if they're not caring for their people, as is their responsibility, their clan mother will warn them and point out what they're doing and then warn them again. And then if they still don't follow it, she will remove their title and pass it to somebody else. Back in 1613, after Europeans had come here across the ocean, there's, as you know, there was some conflict, and a treaty was a treaty was signed in the form of a wampum belt at the time called the two-row wampum. And what it looks like as a wampum belt of beads is two purple stripes parallel side by side with white between them. And each of the purple stripes one represents a ship, one represents a canoe. The canoe is the Haudenosaunee people, that's the Gaigono and several other nations in a confederacy. And the ship is the European settlers, precursors of the United States. And the idea is that neither the canoe nor the ship will tell each other how to run their vessel, but they will, coexist side by side on this river, and they can ask each other for help as needed. So that was a long time ago. Now it's now. In between, we had things like the Sullivan Campaign of Destruction in the 1700s, when the people of the ship, the white settlers, wildly violated this treaty and went through intentionally destroying indigenous homes, farms, like everything in this general region of the continent. And arguably, the people whose livelihoods were destroyed then have not really yet had reparation made or rebuilt fully from that in the ensuing centuries. So now the situation that folks have described is that there are still Gaigono people living here in Tompkins County and also in Seneca County nearby. And it's my belief that we as individuals, descendants of the people of the ship, the European settlers, but also we as a legislature elected to represent some of those people, specifically those living and working on traditional Gaigono land. We have a responsibility to uphold the two-row wampum treaty and make sure that our ship is doing what we said and not trying to tell the canoe, the indigenous folks, how to live. But what is actually happening is that the Bureau of Indian Affairs, like our US government, has been empowering with paper legitimacy and money this one guy, Clint Halftown, who is not, who holds no condoled responsibility in the government system I described among the Gaigono people. But he has been given a lot of legitimacy to oppress his own people by our government. That is happening, that has been happening for 2 decades. And that is what people are asking us to call upon our own government to stop. I know we've had some, US citizens coming to call on us about it, and Gaigono people as well. I want to read, sorry, I don't know how to navigate the microphone, a little bit from a May 2021 letter from the Gaigono Council of Chiefs, saying, among other things, this is May 2021. The Bureau of Indian Affairs recognizes a group led by Federal Representative Clint Halftown. Clint Halftown has failed as a federal representative to the traditional Cayuga citizens. Clint Halftown continues to bring harm, anxiety, and stress to the traditional Cayuga citizens in an already stressful year. The Bureau of Indian Affairs has endorsed Clint Halftown as the federal representative and his illegitimate government, and now they must remove him before he creates more devastation or death to the traditional Cayuga citizens or harm to innocent American citizens. That was May, a little more than a year ago. Last fall, several people came and spoke before this body about this exact topic. And 2 weeks ago, a little less than 2 weeks ago, there was in fact more devastation to the traditional Cayuga citizens and very nearly harm to innocent American citizens. I guess I'll borrow, someone else's words as well. On the evening of Wednesday, August 3, after the demolition of another Cayuga-held property nearby, at least 20 armed members of the non-native Cayuga Nation police targeted a farmhouse at the direction of Clint Halftown and the Halftown Council. This house was the home of Wanda John, a Gaigono elder. The armed mercenaries entered without a warrant and hauled Ms. John out of her home so violently that they injured her. Once outside, the mercenaries threw her to the ground, stepped on her head, and then zip-tied her wrists together and placed her in a vehicle. The mercenaries forced Ms. John to watch their destruction of her home. A Halftown Enterprises payloader demolished all four corners of the house, destroying its structure and rendering it uninhabitable. They also destroyed a barn on the property used by the traditional Gayagono community and citizens to gather for their ceremonies, and a garden shed. Ms. John's injuries required immediate emergency medical attention. Contemporaneous with the demolition of Ms. John's home, Halftown's mercenaries attacked another Indigenous woman with bear spray, an extremely potent capsaicin-based weapon. When she arrived at the emergency room, the medical staff did not have knowledge of effective treatment for capsaicin-related injuries, which prolonged her needless suffering. In other words, because of the US's inaction, more harm has come to innocent Indigenous folks, descendants of those who grew up on this land that we're working on, who are just trying to live their lives. And Halftown has put out some messaging about the house that was bulldozed, which you may read and which is not true, saying that it was uninhabitable and unused, but it was very much habitable. It had been used that day for a summer school for some Gayagono kids. I've been to that house. I'm happy to show you pictures. I'm happy to show you pictures of the half demolished house now. It's really pretty awful to see. I know there was a beautiful garden there too. They wrecked that as well. All this to say that we have both the words over and over an explanation from the traditional Gayagono leaders that I think it's our responsibility to trust and not question as folks. And I'm speaking to my fellow non-native government reps here. It's our responsibility to just listen to them. And then we also have this clear, just atrocity and actions happening not that far away. I know it's outside their county, but we've got Tompkins County residents who have been going up to Seneca Falls in solidarity with our Gayagono neighbors, at least one of whom was present at the house when it was demolished, and they bulldozed it without cutting off either the electric or gas lines, I have since found out. So yeah, this is not don't think proper demolition of an abandoned building. Think more an act of domestic terrorism. So I'm sorry, I'll be quiet soon. We've got, some of us are working on a draft letter to the Bureau of Indian Affairs that I'm hoping my colleagues will join me in signing. I want to thank Rich John and Randy Brown in particular for doing some work to bring this issue to the forefront of our attention and action. Thanks all.
Thank you, Veronica. Next is Mike Sigler and then Ann Corman.
I just want to thank everybody who's already voted. Thank you for voting. We are now in early voting. A lot of people aren't used to having an August 23rd day to vote. If you are a Democrat in Tompkins County, you will get two ballots. One will be for a primary between, I believe, Riley and Cheney. And the other one will be for a race between Joe Sempolinski on the Republican side and on the Democratic side, Max Delapaya. So Republicans, you'll only get one ballot, and that'll be for the election. That's to fill the remainder of Tom Reed's seat for the next 4 months or so. And the other one is obviously for the Democrats, it's for the primary. And that will be the person who will go up against Mark Molinaro for the new 19th district, which we are now a part of, along with pretty much every county along the southern tier, all the way out to the western border of Massachusetts. So get out there and vote, please. You have until Tuesday. I'll be voting tomorrow in the morning and then having a very nice breakfast. So thanks.
Thank you, Mike Sigler. Next is Ann Corman.
Thanks, Madam Chair. I just, I'll start off with just adding to what my colleague just said regarding voting. There's a few other things on the ballot. One of the other ones I just wanted to point out for the Democratic primary is a primary for state Senate representative between Leah Webb and Leslie Bingsburg. And so I want to also thank my colleague Veronica Pillar for highlighting and detailing the history and the information. It's really important. So I'm glad that Veronica took the time to do that. Several of us, including our esteemed chair and legislative colleague Randy Brown. So we met with Sachem Chief Sam George today and got a little more history and a little more information on what would be helpful. So as Veronica said, she's drafting a letter that we can sign and send to the Bureau of Indian Affairs and possibly further. And I just wanted to highlight, a couple of things that she said that I think in the United States, especially this past year, we are no stranger to, when we saw a possible insurgency and possibly having an illegitimate leader. So I think we can relate to that there is an illegitimate leader of the Guyahona people, and they are asking for our help. And I think we should help them in any way we can. So I will help with those efforts. And let's see. I wanted to thank other folks who came to talk today to talk about crime and drug addiction. And just wanted to end by just showing I have some tickets here. Oh, they're a little hard to see, but these are for the New York State Fair. And these are free tickets for LGBTQ plus Pride Day, which this year is on Friday, August 26th. And you can contact me if you want some tickets. You don't have to be in the LGBTQ plus family to go. If you want to go to the fair on that day, on the 26th, Friday, you can use some of these tickets. So I have some of, my phone number is 607-592-2886. People can call me or text me. And they're also available at our Human Rights Office, so the Tompkins County Human Rights Office on the right off the Commons, and looking at trying to see if we can distribute them directly to our employees too at the county. And that's all I have. So thank you.
Thank you, Ann. Next is Mike Lane and then Randy Brown.
I'm pleased we're still flying the Ukrainian flag, but I'm sorry we're having to do so because that brutal war with the Russian atrocities, Russian aggression goes on. It's costing a lot of money. It's costing a lot of lives for nothing. I wanted to speak again about it tonight because of the recent reports of the shelling of the nuclear plant that's going on again in the Ukraine. Nuclear plants are so dangerous. I hope we don't have to go to nuclear further in this country. I was quite interested in an opinion piece that was in the Ithaca Journal a few days ago by Mr. Joel Rabinowitz of Graton, who responded to a piece that had been talking about the closure of the Indian Point nuclear reactors. He said some things that better than I could say, and I just want to read a few lines from him. He said the closure of the Indian Point was clearly not a mistake. That was done by the Governor Cuomo. Nuclear power is an unforgiving technology. If something goes wrong, it can go really badly wrong. We only have to look at the 3 Mile Island, Chernobyl, and Fukushima accidents to know that this is true. At Fukushima, heroic emergency workers sacrificed years of their expected lifespans by exposing themselves to horrific levels of radiation in their desperate efforts to contain the runaway damage. Finally, the problem of nuclear waste still hasn't been solved. All nuclear plants must be decommissioned eventually. The highly radioactive spent fuel rods of decommissioned plants, such as Indian Point, will have to be stored and monitored by a technology-capable society for tens of thousands of years. Yet how do we know a society like ours will even exist 50,000 years from now? It may well be that the new generation of nuclear plants will be safer and more standardized and produce less waste. But given the industry's track record and the unsolved waste problems, why should any society, let alone New York State, agree to such a devil's bargain? I thought he said that better than I could have said it myself. I've been accused of being 50 years behind the time, but I think I'd rather be 50 years behind the time than 50,000 years from now still worrying about spent nuclear rods.
Thank you, Mike. Randy Brown?
Yes, I just want to talk about the Cayuga Nation a little bit. Sachem George cleared up some issues for me today, but he also made it clear that he's not asking us to take sides in any way. They just want representation, and their representation is based on the traditional method. And they have in their clans, there's 10 clans, but they currently only have 7 sachems of that. And they're unanimous in not wanting Mr. Halftown to continue. Yet the Bureau of Indian Affairs is not recognizing them at all. And so that's why I'm for a strong letter to the Bureau of Indian Affairs to give them a voice, and that's all they want. They want to be respected for their way of life, and right now it's not. So that's why I'm supporting it.
Thank you, Randy. Lee Shirtliff.
Just a quick note, in addition to the activity Ann just talked about in the state fair coming up, we have one big event up in our area of the county next week, Friday the 26th, Saturday 27th, Sunday the 28th is Graton Old Home Days. And it's a traditional celebration of community and our heritage and traditions and services that are out there. And I'd extend an invite to my colleagues here and those that may be viewing this tonight. A lot of different things, a lot of different interests are represented. Community art show, historical association, arts and crafts, collectibles show and sale, and the grand parade, the largest in the region, on Saturday night at 6 o'clock. So if you all have a chance to come out that way, see what a welcoming community we have there in Graton. Thank you.
Thank you, Lee. Veronica Pillar.
Thank you. This will be shorter. Right before I came here, I stopped by Cass Park for an event from the Overdose Awareness Project, trying to learn about and honor folks who have lost their lives to overdose or fentanyl poisoning. And thanks to our public commenter for sharing her experience around that. For anyone listening, it's going on, this event to acknowledge loss and try to prevent future losses is going on at the Cass Park Pavilion until 7. We are riveting but recorded, so you could go there if you're interested. And then one of the things it's building up to is an event including a march called the Trail of Truth for overdose awareness in Binghamton this August 20th, so this Saturday from 2 p.m. to 7 p.m. I think if you just look up Trail of Truth Binghamton, and Truth Farm as a sponsoring organization, they're going to be, honoring and remembering those we've lost to opiate overdoses and learning about how to fight back against this epidemic. And they will be doing free overdose reversal training there. So I encourage you to check it out.
Thank you, Veronica. I can honestly say that if the legislature had an album, I think a wonderful song would be Riveting but Recorded. So that is all you. I have Mike Lane, Greg Mezzi, and Mike Sigler.
I just wanted to respond quickly to Lee. Lee, Old Home Days in Graton is always wonderful. Glad you brought it up. The parade, Tompkins County had a presence in that parade and many parades in the county over several years. We're not there this year. I hope that maybe next year we can get back to doing Ithaca Festival, Graton, and other parades, Newfield, because it's a great time, and I think it's nice for the members of our community to be able to see some of the things that Tompkins County does.
Thank you, Mike. Greg Mezzi, and then Mike Sigler.
I'd just like to nominate Mike Lane for the festivals chair position.
Yes, I'd second that.
I had to do the flag committee.
All right, you'll be excused then.
That was good experience.
Yeah, it sounds like
That was a
come with
warm-up.
quite the resume. No, I'm all set. I just wanted to second the riveting but recorded.
Yeah,
So
it's definitely a top 10. Mike Sigler.
Well, I'll be quick just because I need to respond to Mike Lane. Nuclear power kills the fewest people of any energy source in the world. That's even including things like Chernobyl and Fukushima. With solar, you have 100 to 150 deaths per year. Wind kills even more than that. Coal kills a lot more than that. Your lungs. Nuclear, zero deaths in this country. Even with, if you were to go all the way back 50 years to 3 Mile Island, the reason that plant failed was because of control systems. And we have made advances in the last 50 years in those control systems, as we have with nuclear power in general, using, now you don't even really need water to do that cooling. There are a lot of different systems out there. Some are getting tested right out in Montana right now. And I do also want to mention, obviously, fusion, that's fission, which I believe in. I think fission is a good source because you're not putting it's not really pollution. You're not putting it out in the environment. You're containing it. Fusion, we had our first ignition out in California just this past week. And that is one of the 2 key steps, actually, of getting fusion power going. We just need more material to fuse together. And I think they're on their way to that as well. So I will say that I would imagine that fission nuclear scientists know a little bit more about fusion technology. And so the more of them we have, probably the better in terms of our future power needs. So thanks.
Thank you, Mike. Anyone else for legislator privilege of the floor? Deborah Dawson?
I hate to prolong this, but I'm curious, how does wind power kill people?
Because you fall off the tower.
Oy, okay.
But there's actually a lot of those. We're not even going to get into the birds. Snow White would not be pleased.
So Sigler, last meeting you announced you were having a baby, and this week I was thinking you were probably going to announce you were going back for a PhD in physics.
No.
Any announcements?
No time.
No. Okay. Okay. Any other questions or comments? Okay. Thank you, legislators. And
oh, one more thing.
Oh, go ahead.
Considering you mentioned PhD, I want to congratulate Leslie McBean-Clairborn.
Yes. Yes, Leslie. Good job,
Defended her
Mike.
dissertation.
Good job, Leslie. We're all very proud of you.
Now a doctor.
That's right.
Fantastic.
Okay, so I'm going to move on to the chair's report. I'd like to thank, let's see here, Dan and Sigler for taking away 2 of the items I was going to speak about tonight, which leaves me with one last thing. I'd like to remind legislators of the upcoming budget conversations and also thank our departments and administrative staff for their work as our budget season is kicking off. I look forward to spending so much more time with my colleagues. So look forward to it. Okay, next. Oh, I do have a chair's appointment. The Workforce Development Board, Ron Olson, business seat, term expires June 30th, 2024. And Suzanne Saracoin, business seat, term expires June 30th, 2025. Next, we are going to have a special topical presentation by Tompkins County very own Jay Franklin, Assessment Director. Welcome, Jay.
Hey, good evening, everyone. Thanks for having me here. I'm going to try to share my screen and see what happens. Okay. There we go. Can you see me?
Yes, we can.
Or can you see the presentation? I don't really care if you see me, but
Yeah, we can see it.
here's a little recap of the 2022 real property tax law legislative update. I just want to touch on a couple things and just to show you what the state did and what they didn't do this year. On the handout, you see if the bill has been delivered to the governor yet. One of the biggest questions is how bills get delivered to the governor and in what order. I've never been able to figure that out. Everyone that I've asked doesn't know how it happens. But once the bill gets to the governor's desk, she then has 10 days to sign it. But she can't sign it until the bill gets to her desk. So if we want to advocate to that, we have to talk to the two houses and get into their secret process on how those bills are delivered. But even if it was delivered today or delivered December 31st, we still have time to opt into that by March 1st of 2023 to have it applicable on our 2023 assessment rolls. So going through here, here's a couple bills. Here is the condo bill that the New York State Assessors Association and the New York State Association of County Directors of Real Property Tax Services have been advocating for as long as I've been around. So this would, as it currently stands, condominiums are assessed as a whole building, and then we apportion the value to its individual units. This often results in a 40, 60, 70% reduction in the taxable value of those individual units, as if they were assessed on the sale price as any other single family home is. So this would be a local option that you would opt into and allow me to assess them at their sale price. I'm going to caution you on this. I think this could have issues for people trying to develop condominiums here in the county. I could be wrong, and I'm not advocating for or against this, but I just want you to be aware. And this is one of those bills that has not yet been delivered to the governor. The next bill, if you have questions, stop me. The next bill is one that has allowed an increase in the exemption or the income limits for the low-income senior and low-income disabled person exemption. The last time New York State allowed this was way back in 2007. We adopted the state maximum back in 2008. You were allowed to kind of like phase in like a $3,000 increase over a couple year period. And we finally are at the state maximum. So our current scale right now is if your income is just under $37,400, you get a 5% reduction. And if your income is under $29,000, you get a 50% reduction in your assessment. Now, income is loosely defined as your adjusted gross minus any IRA distributions plus any non-taxable Social Security income. And then there's about 60 other oddities that Tammy Van Orman knows that I don't. But we always encourage people to apply. So at GO, on the next meeting on 9/1, I'll be bringing forth a resolution to increase our exemption limits to $33,000 for that 50% exemption. That's about where it would be if we would have increased our limits the same percentage over the years as when we started to back in the 80s. So that was just my number of picking a random number out of the air to start off with. This would also give us some more surety as to what the effect this would be on the tax base and the end result on everyone else's tax bill. So this, I think this is a good interim step that we could always go and then take a look at it. But obviously, it's up to your decision, and I have no opinion. But this was signed by the governor into law on August 8th. I think it was delivered on the 5th, and she turned right around and signed it. Here's the big one, the volunteer firefighter and ambulance worker that Mr. Lynch spoke to. This would provide a 10% reduction in the taxable value for qualifying volunteer firefighter and ambulance workers. There is a local option to continue this exemption for a surviving spouse who either died in the line of duty or who passed away. We'd have to consider that. I'm going to have to work with Doer to confirm this eligibility. I don't know who a qualifying volunteer would be. I'm not going to count how many calls or fires that they go to, but I'm slightly concerned with ceding my authority of granting an exemption. So as long as I work with Doer, I think we can get past that. And this bill has not yet been delivered to the governor yet, so we can't sign it into law. What didn't happen this year is conservation easement. Back last year, or back 2 years ago, I think the town of Danby got a conservation easement exemption passed by both houses. They have still not yet adopted that yet for local option. So based upon that, we met in committee maybe at the legislature as well. And we were asking New York State to allow a conservation easement that would just provide a 50% exemption for anybody who has a easement in perpetuity. The current exemption allows for termed easements to get an exemption. So if you had a 10 to 25 year exemption, I think it's a 25% exemption. That seemed pretty excessive for land that isn't going to be protected in perpetuity. But the House had concerns that it wasn't exactly like all of the other conservation easement legislation that's out there. We're Tompkins County, we always got to be different. So on September 15th, I'll be meeting with the Committee on Real Property Taxation in order to try to bring this back for 2023. One thing, I will like to give a great thank you to Jordan Lesser and Assemblywoman Kellis in order to try to steer this through. And we tried, but we just couldn't get it done with everything else that was going on during the session. And I have one more key thing that I just want to talk about. It's not really legislative, but it resulted out of the 2021 legislative session. The New York State Department of Taxation and Finance was directed to work with the New York State Assessors Association and NYSERDA to create yet another solar valuation model. I think about 3 years ago, I worked with NYSERDA, Hutan Muveni, in order to try to create a valuation model so that assessors would be able to do this, trying to create a discounted cash flow with data or in a type of property that you don't have a lot of. It's very difficult for a small town assessor to do so. So we created a model, everyone liked it, and then all of a sudden nobody liked it. So New York State Department of Taxation and Finance, I think, had other ulterior motives in order to try to get more solar in the state without solar having to negotiate pilots with some of the smaller towns or negotiate with 4 different entities. They might have to negotiate with the village, the town, the county, and the school district all separately, with varying degrees of knowledge about the solar industry. But this is not a good model. The model creates a value that's about 25% of the fair market value of what these installations are. I've seen enough appraisals of these over the years, and about $1 million a megawatt is a good figure for our zone C in the NISO regions. But this is coming out at about 25% of that value. And luckily for us, our IDA took it upon themselves to create their uniform solar policy. If we had done our pilots through the real property tax law, section 487, you can't have a pilot that's greater than the amount of taxes that are due. And with this new calculator, the majority of our pilot payments are greater than what the taxes would be if the property was taxable. You would think if that's the case, more solar companies would be going towards the route of full taxation as opposed to pilots, but they're worried that New York State's going to fix the model. So they'd rather have tax surety than maybe a little bit less, but they're concerned about where it's going to go. And assessors are concerned that New York State won't fix the model. But on April 29th, a couple of towns in Schoharie County brought a court case against the New York State Department of Taxation and Finance and said that this model wasn't adopted correctly to the rules and regulations as needed. So there was a temporary restraining order that said assessors do not have to use this model. I continued to use it, though, based upon legal advice of our tax certiorari our tax certiorari attorneys. They felt that the reason why the temporary restraining order was granted is that you cannot increase an assessment after the tentative roll is filed. So I think the court felt that having a higher assessment on the roll, you can always reduce it going back or going forward, or you can do refunds if someone paid taxes on a value that was too high. So we'll see where that goes. I'm keeping track of it, but for us, the full market value of these only affects the fire district taxes for these. So it's not a big figure that we're talking about, but when we pay attorneys and they give us our opinion, I feel like I have to go with that. So that's where we stopped.
Jay, we have a question from Mike Ziegler. Would you like to take questions now or afterward?
I'll take them whenever. That way I don't have to keep talking, but I think I'm done. So I'm going to get off of this slide so that we can see everybody in case, if that sound good.
Sounds good. Mike Ziegler.
I had two questions, Jay, for you. When you're talking solar, we're talking about the community solar, right? Not the industrial solar, because the industrial will be handled by the state. Is that correct?
No, I still have to value everything. The siting would be handled by the state. So these models would be for any solar installation that's 1 megawatt or greater. The model only works for installations of size.
But won't the state be handling the pilots for things of over 50 megawatt, I think 25 megawatts under? I thought they were handling the bigger stuff.
I don't believe so with the pilots because that's still local home rule on that. And, it's still because some of our school districts are out of real property tax law, section 487. We're still getting the solar companies to go through the pilot route. So I still think that will be the case. I will double check with NYSERDA and give Hutan a call just to make sure that I am right in my assumptions. Solar is changing so quickly that I feel like if I turn away for a week, I'm going to miss something.
Right. No, I got you. The second question is the 33%, or $33,000. Sorry. Was that the maximum we can do, or?
No, the maximum that we could go up to is $50,000. I don't know how that would affect the tax base. I don't have good enough income information anymore because the state took over the enhanced star. So you could go up to $50,000. I couldn't even guess as to how much that would be, because that would be for a 50% exemption. So you could get up to about $60,000 of income and get a 5% exemption. So if you went up that much, we're going to have to talk about adding more staff to process these exemptions.
Thanks, Jay.
Craig Mezzi.
Jay, thanks. I always appreciate the update. And I always pick up different things when hearing it again out of committee too. So thank you. So we're going to have this conversation about the 33,000 for the low income senior, the low income disabilities exemption, correct? Correct. I guess I would just be curious to maybe have a little bit more detail on what it would take or what it would mean if we did make the decision to change that from 33,000 to something greater. I know that might be a short order, but at least if we wanted to make that decision or explore that, I think it would be helpful to have the full picture around it and what that would mean, because I think it's a worthy conversation to have, and I guess would give you some time or your team some time to put some information together or have that ready for the conversation when we do have it.
Thanks. I'll put together as much information as I can. It's going to be very cloudy. So don't hold me to any of my guesses as to what it'll be, but I'll guess as best as I can.
Okay. Yeah, no, I appreciate that. Thank you.
Randy Brown.
Yes, hello, Jay. I was speaking to some firemen, and they said that when they file their taxes now, they get a $200 tax credit for being a fireman, fire person, and said that would be a much better way for that system to work, because a lot of their volunteers don't own homes, especially younger ones. So the incentive for to get more young people is not there for that. So I just wanted to share that with you.
Yeah, no, I kind of agree with that. There's some exemptions which should be granted to reduce property taxes and some that are better utilized through the income tax, just for the same reason that you were talking about, for people who don't own homes. They're not eligible for this part of that exemption. So that's definitely something to take a look at. And one thing that I forgot to mention with this is when I was doing some research, digging back through some old files, I saw back in 2002, we petitioned New York State to allow a very similar exemption to this. So there's, I think, 26 exemption statutes that are similar to this right now for other counties. So it was good to see the state finally allow this to happen for all counties and not just those 26.
Any other questions for Jay Franklin? Deb Dawson?
You wouldn't happen to be a Dallas Cowboys fan, would you, Jay?
I am not. Jets, Jets.
Well, what's with the blue and white stars?
Oh, my daughter dances for the Next Generation out of Lansing, and they were down at the Meadowlands 2 weeks ago and won 2 world championships for a couple of dances they did.
Well, congratulations to her.
He's somewhere here.
Congratulations to her, and I'm glad you're not a boys fan.
Glad you're a Jet fan.
Yes, I've destined my kids for failure, so.
So have I.
Okay. Well, thank you, Jay. We appreciate your time tonight.
And one more thing, big thanks for Dom. I was able to put this presentation together in about 45 minutes from his template, so it works. And the time that you put into it, I didn't have to. Thanks, Dom.
Thanks, Jay. Glad it worked for you.
Okay, let's see here. Next on our agenda, we have reports by the county administrator, Lisa Holmes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll be fairly brief. In county administration, we're still continuing to pull together the 2023 operating and capital budgets in time for your next legislature meeting on September 6th. So that's keeping us busy. Another item, on March 1st, the legislature confirmed my appointment of Rosemary Avila as Workforce Development Board Director. And with that appointment, approved a 6-month residency waiver while she and her spouse sought to relocate here from Syracuse. And unfortunately, with the market being what it is, they have not yet found a home. And so and the 6-month is almost due. So I'm coming to you tonight requesting the extension of that waiver for another 12 months to allow her a little more time to find housing.
Can I have a motion, please? Moved by Deborah Dawson, seconded by Greg Mezzi. And if we would like, we can go into executive session to discuss, or if there are no comments or questions, then we can vote on that. A roll call.
Travis Brown.
Yes.
Oh. Randy Brown, I'm sorry. Deborah Dawson.
Yes.
Henry Granison.
Yes.
Rich John.
Yes.
Dan Klein.
Yes.
Ann Corman.
Yes, for me and Amanda Corman too, yes.
Mike Lane.
Yes.
Greg Mezzi.
Yes.
Veronica Pillar.
Yes.
Lee Shirtliff.
Yes.
Mike Sigler.
Yes.
Travis Brooks.
Yes.
Shauna Black.
Yes.
With 13 ayes, 0 noes.
Okay, that passes.
Thank you. And then the last item is we have Frank Krupa, our Public Health Director, here to give us a brief update on monkeypox.
Oh, sorry about that light behind me. Let me turn that off real quick. A little better. Sorry. Thank you. And appreciate you sandwiching me right between Jay and taxes and Rick and more money stuff. Real great place to be. I'm back. Unfortunately, I hoped it had been longer before I had to check in on another communicable disease, but unfortunately, we are dealing with monkeypox now, and I just wanted to give everyone an update on where we are and kind of what you can expect in the coming weeks and months. We have had 3 identified cases in Tompkins County residents. None of those cases were locally acquired, and only one of them had any local contacts. So far, we've been limited in exposures within the community, and we're thankful for that, but I don't know that that's going to last very long. I think eventually we will have more cases, and likely we'll have some locally acquired cases as well. If there's any good news about monkeypox, is it's less severe than many other diseases, including COVID. The symptoms, the rash, some upper respiratory symptoms generally are fairly mild, although very uncomfortable. In some instances, it can be severe. And in rare cases, it can cause death, but much less frequent than other diseases that we face from a communicability standpoint. So a couple of things. We have been putting out information about what folks should be looking for through a lot of different avenues, both publicly to the general public, through our local healthcare system. So our practitioners know what to look for. As you can imagine, many of them have never seen monkeypox symptoms, and so we want them to know what to be looking for. You've probably heard by now that unfortunately this current outbreak in the United States is primarily centered with men that have sex with men. So we've been working with our local LGBTQ plus organizations. We sent some letters out last week so that they could help us, reach that target population. I will say that it's not a sexually transmitted infection. It is generally transmitted through close, intimate contact with an individual that's infected and has lesions. Unfortunately, that population has been really the first ones to be hit here in the US. It will likely spread beyond that population, and anyone can get monkeypox. We just want to be clear about that as well. Vaccines on this front are limited. There are not enough for anyone who wants monkeypox vaccine at this point. New York State is managing that process. They have primarily provided the vaccine to communities that have local community acquisition of the disease, meaning it's been transmitted in the community. And much of that is in New York City and the metropolitan area. So most of the vaccine is going there. There have been some incidents of vaccine pods upstate as well. And New York State is looking at different scenarios and different locations where they think they might be able to reach the target populations to get vaccine to folks. We will eventually get vaccine. Last update I was given was middle to end of September. They thought the supply might be large enough that we'd have a bit. Initially, similar to when we were doing COVID, there will be criteria that need to be met in order to be eligible for those first doses that we receive. And once we get that information, we'll certainly share that. And we'll be looking to, put together pods for dispensing the vaccine to those populations that are eligible. So that's coming. There is treatment. It's not widely available, but if there are cases, right now, the health department would work with them and their healthcare provider to try to get them access. We do hope that those treatments will become more readily available in the future and that anyone will be able to get access. So that's kind of where we are right now. Just wanted to give you all an update, and I'd be happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Are there any questions for Frank? Randy Brown?
Yes, thank you, Frank. I wanted to ask you questions about fentanyl strips and your thoughts on that, and whether that's something we're going to talk about supplying or not.
Yes, so we've been talking with some of our community partners about fentanyl strip access, namely those that are working closely with drug users in our community. And they feel fairly comfortable that they have and are able to get the fentanyl strips out. We have also reached out to our higher ed institutions to see where they are with access and availability of fentanyl strips, because what we're hearing is that where the gap might be is for those casual users. I hate to use that word, but it does seem like the active, regular drug users that are accessing drug user health services, they're aware of fentanyl and they know where they can get fentanyl strips if they're interested. It's really those that might be less aware that we're trying to figure out what the appropriate locations would be, and if there is demand for fentanyl strips. So we're still looking into it, but we definitely see that there might be an opportunity here to fill a gap.
Thank you.
Henry Grandison.
Yes, thank you for your presentation, Frank. Has there been a demand for the monkeypox vaccination in the county?
Yeah, we've gotten calls at the health department, and people are rightfully frustrated that they can't get access. Unfortunately, right now, the only real option we have is to direct them to the pods happening in other communities. But honestly, those are filling up as quickly as they're able to offer them. Because even in a county like Rochester, last I had heard, Monroe, they had only received several hundred doses. So we're not talking about large numbers of availability. So to answer your question, yeah, we have been getting some calls, not huge numbers of calls, but we definitely want to make the vaccine available as soon as we can.
And where are those other pods? Just bigger counties?
Yeah, mainly the closest one was in Onondaga last week on Wednesday, and at the time Onondaga hadn't had a case, so I wasn't 100% sure. I did reach out and I did get some feedback that perhaps it was because the state fair was going to be happening up there. So the state is trying to be very strategic in where they're sending doses outside of communities that have local transmission.
Thank you.
Frank, I hate to bring up the topic of COVID, but I know that the college students are coming back, and then our K through 12 students are going back to school in another 2 weeks or so. Do we currently have testing sites up and running? Can you talk a little bit about our plan moving forward?
Yeah, so there is still testing at the mall site. We did work through the legislature in providing us resource and with Cayuga Health Systems to maintain the mall site over the summer, really in preparation to see what might happen in the fall here. So there will still be PCR access. Obviously, the home tests, the antigen tests are widely available. We are still in communication with our local libraries and other places that have been handing them out. And as they need them, we request more from the state and get those redistributed. So, and the state is also going to be sending test kits to the schools themselves, I think, in preparation for them to get them home to the kids before they return to school, so they could do a test right before they come back to make sure they're not coming in positive. So there is a lot of work going on around making sure that the testing is available. And I'm sure you've heard over the last week or so, the CDC has updated some of its guidance, relaxed it in some places as well. We are waiting for any new guidance from the state about K through 12 and their reopenings and what they might expect, but we haven't seen that yet. And we are back to meeting weekly with our higher ed partners to help support them in their reopening around COVID and also monkeypox. So we are still on top of it, tracking and working with our community partners.
Thank you. Dan Klein.
For the last year, Cornell had a surveillance testing program going on, and they're now suspending that. That's my understanding. So I would assume that during that time, we wouldn't have had a lot of Cornell students showing up at the mall for tests since they were getting tested on campus, and that maybe that would change now. Do we have a way of tracking if there are Cornell students showing up at the mall for the testing?
That's a question from like a year ago, Dan. But it's a good one. I'll have to confirm. I do believe when you register, it asks you your affiliation, whether it's a local business or a higher education institution. I'll have to double check on that for you. I think the answer is yes, but I'll have to make sure.
And then here's maybe another question from a year ago also. So at one time there was something, and correct me if I've got this a little wrong, that if an employer was sending people to get tested, that we were trying to work out something with those employers that they would be paying us or tracking it or some version of that. Is that still in effect?
Yeah, so we do monitor. I will be honest, Amy Hendricks was kind of the monitor of all of that. And so usually Cayuga Health Systems will alert us if they think something like that is happening. But I think we had gotten most of the local businesses trained that if they wanted to do that type of surveillance testing, they would contract directly with CHS and pay for that themselves. Although I do believe that with the ubiquitousness of the antigen tests, that has become less of an issue, that most people are relying on the antigen tests unless they're symptomatic, and then we recommend they get a PCR. So I don't think we're having that happen, but we'll certainly double check and make sure that it's not.
Thanks. I mean, with this change in the Cornell surveillance testing program, if that were to result in a big upswing in testing in the mall, I guess it's something that I would be interested in hearing about. I think it's something that should be on our radar. Thank you.
Yeah, and we'll definitely keep track of that. And Cornell is certainly cognizant of if there is an impact that they would look to address it. Honestly, I don't think we're going to have a lot of college students going to the mall for testing. I think they'll likely avail themselves of antigen testing or no testing at all. But we'll definitely keep an eye on it.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Frank? Mike Sigler?
Just last question. I mean, I've been looking at the numbers and they're great. Obviously, there's like single digits. Have we determined a point where we're just not going to do that? I mean, is there an end point, or are we just going to do that? Or haven't we determined that yet?
Are you referring to the testing at the mall?
We do a report every day and I get it and it's interesting. I just didn't know if there was ever an end point for us tracking that, or if we're just, I don't know. I don't have an answer for that. So.
Yeah, and we're having internal conversations about that, Mike. The one thing we didn't want to do is stop reporting during the summer when we knew things were going to be low, and then have a significant uptick in the fall that people would be clamoring for information about. So really where we are now is there's a couple of things I'm looking for. I want to see us get through the return of higher ed. And I'd like to see us get through the beginning of the upper respiratory illness season. And that'll really give us a gauge on, is COVID in those two environments going to impact the hospital system negatively, or the severity of illness in our community? If the answer to the question is no, then we will be moving to scale back even more, what we're doing around COVID, and just have, be a more informational campaign around what you should do if you get sick and those kinds of things. So yes, we are evaluating it, and there will be an end. And my hope is that end will happen sometime this calendar year towards the end, but it really is dependent on what happens in the fall.
Thanks, Frank.
Greg Mezzi.
Thanks, Frank. Appreciate the monkeypox update and the way in which you presented the information. So thank you. The second question, I guess the first one wasn't a question. So the new question that I have now, do you have any update or information on boosters and reformulation of boosters and what to expect as we go into the fall with various strains, things like that? Anything that you're hearing or can share?
Yeah, we do expect that there will be a new vaccine designed around the Omicron variant and the more predominant variants now. So I do imagine sometime in the fall, there will be a booster dose that is redesigned for the more prominent strains. We will be watching for that. my initial hope is that the local healthcare system and pharmacies and such will be able to meet the demand associated with it. But if it comes and they do not, we will be ready to support making the vaccine available for the community.
Any other questions for Frank? I don't see any. Thank you, Frank, for visiting tonight and presenting on the monkeypox.
Thank you.
Lisa, do you have anything else for us tonight?
That's it for me. Thank you.
Okay. Let's move on to County Attorney Bill Troy.
I can tell you it's situation normal, but I'll leave it at that. We're busy. We have cases uptick in the family court cases somewhat that Holly's been handling. And I think we're just plodding along, doing fine.
Great. Any questions for Bill? Thank you. Next is Rick Snyder, Director of Finance.
Thank you very much. I have two reports tonight, one short, one long. One you're waiting for with bated breath, and that's the financial report for 2021, which will come second. I do want to give a short casino revenue report. We had been working on this for county admin to come up with projections for the 2023 budget. So I'm going to share my screen and show you where we're at right now. You should be viewing the casino report. Can you see it?
Yes.
Very good. The second quarter is up 20.8% compared to last year. That's this figure right here in the left-hand column, coming in at $624,241 for the second quarter, which you can see for the last 6 years. It's our highest second quarter going back to 2017. It brings our total for the year here at 50% through the year at this point in time to $1.1 million. And the original budget that we've put in the 2022 budget for this year is $575,000, which means we're about $582,000 over our budget right now. And that means we're 201.3% of budget for the year. And then as Mike's requested before, he likes to see the breakdown here at the bottom between the two casinos. Second quarter here, you can see the breakdown for Del Lago at $370,000 and Tioga at $254,000 for a total of the $624,000 second quarter. So that's a very good report, and it gives much needed information to Lisa Holmes and county administration staff to make their projections for the 2023 budget. Any questions on this? Okay. Then I'll go into our financial report for 2021. I first like to thank two members of my staff, Drew Brayman, Deputy Director, and Darrell Tuttle, who's Director of Accounting Services, for working so hard on getting this report done, along with our auditors. They've done a magnificent job of working. Darrell coming in the last couple of months to help us proof the documents and make sure everything's was finished on our annual state report and also on this report that you'll be looking at tonight. Drew has been working with me for the last 7 months on closing the year and going through all our audits, and he's been very valuable in helping us bring it to fruition and to be able to make this presentation to you tonight. The final and audited financial reports I distributed to you by email at near the beginning of this meeting. I think we didn't get them till 2:30 this afternoon, but the final reports, all 5 documents, are attached to the email that went to you and the legislative clerk earlier today before this meeting. I want to thank members of the Budget, Capital, and Personnel Committee who heard the auditor's report last week. And I also want to remind you that after you've heard my presentation tonight, you'll be asked to adopt the resolution that's in your agenda packet that simply accepts the financial statements as presented. I like to start with this executive summary just to show it to you. If you don't have time to read the whole financial report, this one marked executive summary is very valuable because it's only 12 pages long. And one of the first pages is on the general fund, and it gives you a comparison. Right here, we're looking at assets and liabilities for the general fund, but it's given it to you all on one page, and it's given it 5 years worth of data. So here you can see our assets and liabilities in this executive summary. And one of the things you look at very closely is the fund balances. Here at the bottom of page 2 of the executive summary, you can see the fund balances, and that section breaks it down into those which are restricted for one reason or another and that which is unassigned. And you can see where our unassigned balance has grown from about 39 million up to 62 million as of the end of 2021. But this document, the executive summary, goes through the general fund, and then you can look at revenues and expenses for the general fund over 5 years. It's a very concise report. I like it because you can carry it around in a folder, in a briefcase. And if you ever have a go-to document as a legislator where you want to look up some quick numbers, you can see all our revenues and expenditures for the general fund on one page in this one document. And then later on, it goes to the capital project funds, of which there are about 10 different capital project funds all rolled together. Again, you're looking at assets and then revenues and expenditures. We look at the debt service fund, and we look at special revenue funds. And I really love this executive summary. If you don't read anything else, take a gander at that. And that is pretty much what I wanted to show you on that document. In the actual financial report, there is a report called the Independent Auditor's Report. That report gives us an unmodified opinion, which is the best opinion you can get from an independent and external auditing firm. And I've highlighted the section here that says the accompanying financial statements present fairly in all material respects the financial position of the governmental activities, the business type activities, the aggregate discretely presented component units, each major fund. And this shows that we have a clean opinion, and that's probably the best news that you can receive as a legislature looking at the finances of the county. And with that said, I'm going to start the presentation here. You should be looking at the top page of the PowerPoint. Do you see that on your screen?
Yes. Yes, we do.
Thank you very much. Again, the highlights are the internal control document that's part of the financial report. It says there were no instances of non-compliance or internal control weaknesses. So you can check off that block. That's a very important consideration as you evaluate internal controls. Received the unmodified opinion. And in the general fund, we recorded an increase of $17 million here with a fund balance, a total fund balance of $74.5 million. And of that total, $62.1 million was unassigned. Sales tax, which you get reports nearly every month and every quarter, sales tax for 21 came in $6.8 million over budget. In 2020, the year before, we came in $3.5 million under budget. And then in 2019, one more year before that, we were $2.4 million over budget. And I'll have a chart later on that shows sales tax over many more years. Casino revenue, just like I showed you, coming in well above budget this year. Revenue came in last year $1.5 million over budget. 2020, the year before, came in $700,000 under budget. And 2019 and 18 both came in at $800,000 or $0.8 million over budget each of those years. So that looks at some of our primary revenue sources and shows how effective they were in this past year. County's net position, what does that mean? When we look at the county as a whole, we're not looking at each and every fund like the airport fund versus the general fund versus the road fund. We're putting everything together in what we call all-purpose financial statements, which are the first financial statements that you see in the document once you get about 10 or 15 pages into the financial report. So when you see net position, this is an indicator of what does the county have and measure as it's like a fund balance when you meld all the different types of activities together in one group. So our governmental activities went from $129.8 million net position to $175.9 million net position. Of that total net position, we still had a small deficit of a little over $2 million that were considered unrestricted. Why, with all that money and all those net assets, why still have a small $2.2 million unrestricted deficit? Well, that's because we have to recognize our share of our net pension liabilities, which is given to us from New York State Retirement for all the retirees that are going to retire over the next 30 years, and all our OPEB liabilities. OPEB is other and pension benefits that are paid to retirees, of which in our case, Tompkins County, that's primarily health insurance. So when you pay for health insurance for retirees, that's projected over 30 years. And we do an actuarial study for that. And that's illustrated in page 10 of the executive summary to see how much of our liabilities goes towards net pension or OPEB liabilities. Because that came down a lot this year, that was a big reason why our net position went up. So I just thought I'd let you know that one of the places to view county's net position is on page 10 of that little short document called the executive summary. Look at that when you have time, and you can see the county as a whole. And then other good news is our net investment in capital assets increased by $7.5 million or 4.6%. Again, very good news. Nice investment in capital assets. Government activities had revenues of $225.3 million compared to $205.6 million, which was an increase in revenue of $19.7 million or 9.6%. The government activities had expenses of $179.2 million compared to $208.5 million, which was a decrease of $29.4 million or down 14.1%. So you see revenues in all government activities going up, expenses compared to the previous year going down. Our single audit, which is what we do for federal compliance, for federal monies coming to the county, we report federal award programs or federal grants in the amount of $41.2 million. And they're all listed at the very end of the document on page 81 of the financial report. So if you want to see every single federal dollar that we get and all the different programs, that's near the very end of the big book on page 81. And you can see that's $41.2 million. Got two statements here at the end of this slide that describes our debt. Short-term obligations or bands totaled $16.1 million, which was a decrease of $2.2 million from the previous year. Long-term obligations, which also includes not just bonds, but also that net pension liability and that OPEB liability, which is the health insurance cost. Our long-term obligations total $151.2 million, which was a decrease of $46.7 million. That was due to decreases in our net pension liability and our OPEB liability. And you can view that and read more than that on page 45 of the financial report. Investment in capital over 9 years. You see here in 2021 that we come in at $17.8 million, which is very close to where we were last year, where we came in at $18 million. Capital assets over about a 5-year period averages pretty close to that $17 million. So we're pretty close to average. We had one really high year. A lot of that was due to the airport, but given time from 2013 right up to today, you can see that the county has continued to maintain a very conscious and steady contribution towards its capital assets. Another slide that Mike Lane likes, because he asked us to prepare this 5 or 6 years ago, he wanted to see our constitutional debt limit, which is a requirement that we report in all our bond offerings, and it's a number used by the state. And the first part that we show is our total outstanding bonded indebtedness. And in this last year, it was $56.38 million. So that's what this yellow line represents. Goes up and down a little bit, but we ended up at $56.38 million for debt. Now, the next line is that portion of debt that's subject to the debt limit, which is a state-imposed limit. So when you see this green line, except for a few years there, the amount that's subject to the debt limit is exactly the same as our outstanding bonded debt. And then this last line, if you look at the right-hand axis, which is percentages, you can see the debt as a percentage of our debt limit. And that's a factor that Moody's looks at and the state looks at, and that we compute every year with the auditor's help. And that's right at 10.31%. So that's our total bonded debt as a percentage of what our debt limit is. That means we got 90% more debt that we could borrow than what compared to the debt limit. We're only at 10.31%. It's hovered around this number, the 12, 11, 9.99. It's hovered and stayed fairly consistent since 2013, which means each and every year we maintain the level of debt as in previous years. Some years we go up a little bit, and some years we go down a little bit. Now we get into the topic that most of you are very excited about, and that's our general fund. And this impacts our budgeting and our budget decisions. The expenditures include transfers out, and the revenues also include transfers in from other funds. But revenues here are $202 million. That's the red line right here. Very high, $202 million. Expenditures, the blue line, is $185 million for 2021. And you can see there's been steady growth in the revenue, with the exception of 2020 being an aberration. The unassigned fund balance has gone up, and here you can see unassigned balance at $62 million. So over the years, goes back to 2008, and it goes up, and it continues to go up. Even though we budget use of fund balance in each and every budget, it continues to go up. According to this slide, and the numbers behind it, the unassigned balance is at $62 million, and that's just the general fund. Sales tax has contributed a lot towards why we keep having soaring fund balances. Here it shows in 2021, which is not the last line. The last line is 2022 projection. But here in 2021, we had sales tax coming in at $41.6 million. You can see that's obviously higher than almost any year. 2020 was much less, and 2021 was back up to 41.6. Happened to be $6.8 million over our budget. My projection for 2022, which is the current year, is 44.19 million. How did I get that? I just took what our first 5 months of receipts actually were, and based on actuals right up through May, we have June and July to still to distribute. And then I took the actual from the previous year for the last 7 months. So that's pretty conservative. We took the actuals for the first 5 months of this year up through May, and then I just added the 7 months from last year. And that shows that we'll come in at about $14.2 million, $44.2 million in sales tax actual by the end of this year, 2022. And if we do come in that high, we'll be $6.3 million more than our sales tax budget.
Rick, do you want us to ask questions as you go or save them till the end?
If you'd like to, you can save them to the end, or you can jump in at any time. Do we have any so far?
No, he'll wait.
Okay. The sales tax revenue, along with casino revenue, FEMA revenue, which is a FEMA grant revenue, these were the main reasons here. I gave the numbers for revenues that caused us to come up with a $17 million surplus in the general fund. The $17 million surplus is not just from these revenue sources. There's a big impact from, I picked out just the two biggest ones. That's why I said major items only. General government support expenditures as a group is $3.7 million less than what we budgeted in 2021. Economic assistance and opportunity, which is basically DSS, those expenditures came in $5.8 million less than our 2021 budget. And if you want to see comparisons or variance to every single expense category, you can turn to page 62 in the financial report to see comparisons amongst all the categories of revenues and expenses. But I wanted to list what primarily were the biggest drivers of the $17 million surplus in the general fund. A slide I like that I started the first year I came here in 2013. I only had 1 year at that time, but I thought, wow, the county administrator was worried. Did we have an increase in fund balance, or did we have a decrease in fund balance? It took us a while to come up with the figures, but we only had a $1.4 million surplus that year, or a $1.4 million change in the unassigned fund balance. And when it's that close, that concerns county administrators, because it could really go either way. You know, anything that's $3 or $4 million to the plus or minus is pretty close when you're looking at a general fund budget as large as ours. So I added up all the increase over the years since I've been here in 2013. We have a lot of years where it's 4.4, 5.4, 5.6, 3.8 and 17, 2.5 and 18, 4.8 in 19, even in 2020. Yes, even through COVID, we went up $1.8 million, 1.782 million. And then this year, by far, in 2021, just surpassed anybody's expectations, having an increase in the unassigned balance of about $14.1 million. And I said earlier on the first slide right before this that we had a $17 million surplus. Why is this only a $14 million increase? Because some of that went into the assigned fund balance categories. So there was a number that I sent out to the group that showed that there was increases of $5.5 million in the assigned category. And a lot of that was for the increase for the next year's budget, which means budgeted use of fund balance for rollover and for other one-time expenditures, OTRs. There was a $4.1 million increase in the retro pay reserve for union settlements to be paid in future years. That went up a lot according to our careful estimations. And there was even a $400,000 increase in emergency communication R&R. That was all in the assigned fund balance. So when you have a large surplus like $17 million, it doesn't always go to unassigned. Some of it can be assigned to certain other categories. So when you look at the 9-year total on this slide, and I could go back even further, but in 9 years, that accumulation has been $44 million. Guidance on the size of fund balance. We really had a lot of meetings and conversations about this last year when we were changing our fund balance policy. I'll share the same slide we talked about last year that the GFOA, Government Finance Officers Association, recommends not less than 2 months of operating revenues, which translates down to 16.7%. That's from the Government Finance Officers Association. We also, I like to remark that our auditors have recommended that we keep 15 to 20% as a minimum on unassigned fund balance. This slide shows you where we're at as a result of having reformulated the policy on fund balance. The target is now set at 18% for general fund unassigned balance. Remember when it was just 10%? We've been accumulating fund balances that are much larger than that in the unassigned category. So that target was raised last year by you, the legislature, to set that at a higher level. And although we, county administration and finance, strongly recommended that that be set at a range, and what you could do if you went below or above the range, that range would have been 18 to 23%. But that was challenged and not adopted, and the legislator decided to go with this flat 18%. And I'm happy with that because it's better than 10%. The current general fund unassigned balance right now, when you boil it down, is 30.7% of actual revenues as of the end of the year. So we are at 30.7 and our target is 18%. This slide shows you the accumulation of fund balance as a percentage of the general fund actual revenues. Another word or policy change in the actual policy was from comparing it to budgeted revenues. We now in our policy compare it to actual revenues. That might seem like a minor point to you, but The comparing to actual revenues is a bit more standard. Some governments compare it to actual expenditures. Other governments compare it to actual revenues. It's very unlikely that you find governments doing their calculation, though, towards budgeted revenue. So we changed that for you to show a percentage of actual revenues. And right there's the 30.7%. You can see how it's grown. If you're interested on what's 1% of actual revenues, 1% of actual revenues, when you do the calculation, just happens to work out to $2,020,000. So for every 1% that you would increase or want to increase or decrease your unassigned fund balance, you would add or subtract $2 million. $2 million translates to 1% of unassigned fund balance. And again, the actual calculation for 2021 comes in at 30.7%. Here's all the fund balances for each and every fund that comes right from the document. 2021 is this left column, 2020 is the middle column, the dollar change is the right column. Here you can see, I won't read them all, but you can see the general fund went up $17 million. County road and transportation, which is the airport fund, solid waste, they all went down. And then you see some increases for the capital projects, transportation, that fund balance went up, debt service fund went up, all the others went up. So when you look at total fund balance with all the funds, went from 72, almost $73 million in 2020 up to $97 million in fund balance, an increase of $24 million in fund balance.
Rick, Mike Sigler, Mike Sigler has a question for you.
Okay.
Rick, I know the answer to this, but I want our viewers at home to know the answer. And how much is any of that federal money that we got from COVID?
Is any what?
Is any of that 17 million federal money that we got, or is that any COVID money, or?
A lot of that is federal money. And that's where I said that the $41 million in our federal testing in the single audit is shown in the back of the financial report. There's 5 or 6 pages of federal programs where we got a lot of federal dollars. What it does not include, and this was asked at the budget committee level, does it include any of the ARPA money that we received? The answer to that is no. ARPA money that we received in 2021 shows up as a deferred revenue or in the liability section of the balance sheet because we didn't spend it. So all this increase in fund balance is due strictly to other revenue sources like other federal grants, but none of it, except for a very minor portion that was spent in one small highway project, less than, well, it wasn't even $1 million. It was $35,000, but only a very small portion in one of the road projects of ARPA money was spent in 2021. So this fund balance activity for the general fund and the positive nature of revenues in the general does not take into effect the ARPA money that we got. That will be spent in the current year and in 2023, but not in 2021. Does that answer your question, Mike?
Yeah, it does. Thank you.
I'd like to wrap it up. There's just 3 slides left. And in the road fund, we have $7.6 million of revenue here in the right-hand column, which is red, and $7.6 million of expenditures right here. So as you can see, this hasn't changed too much from the prior year, except expenditures went up and revenues did not. So the unassigned fund balance at 2021 just dipped slightly, which was planned according to our budget protocol to purposely decrease the road fund or defund balance. So the fund balance at the end of 2021 in the road fund is $1,188,000. transportation fund, that's what it's called by the auditors. We know it as the airport operations fund. Here you can see airport operations, and revenues came in at $3.97 million for the year. And so you can see the revenues here have consistently gone up the last 4 years. We had a really high year back in 2017, then it dips. And you would think this might be worse because the airport has not performed all that well over the last couple of years operation, with flights being down, numbers of people being transported. But a lot of that was made up through grants that came through the federal and state government to make them whole, so to speak. So the revenue side of the airport operating fund looks pretty good. Unfortunately, expenditures came in higher than revenues, $4.1 million in 2021. So we had a net loss for the year in the airport of $150,000. Not a big loss, but nevertheless a loss. And that means their fund balance in just the airport operating fund was $1.35 million fund balance, down from $1.5 million the year before. Still, overall, in spite of the hardship at the airport, it does look fairly promising to see a very slow recovery taking place in the airport. Now, I can't speak to 2022 because this does not include any projections for 2022, the current year. But
We have a few questions here.
Okay.
I just want to make sure I understood. I think I heard what you said, but that all the federal money that the airport received, it wasn't ARPA money, but it was other titles. That's all accounted for in there. That's not to come yet, is it? That's all been
right. That's all in the red revenue. Yeah, the red bars there includes all federal dollars received thus far in 2020 and 2021.
Thank you very much.
So Rick, I have a question as well. As far as the airport fund, can you tell us how, whenever we look at the bar graph here, can you tell us how much of that includes a county contribution to support our airport?
None. So far, there's been no county contribution in 2020 or 2021, but you will be seeing one, I anticipate, in 2023 as Lisa's putting the budget together now with Norma, and I've heard that there'll probably be a subsidy payment to be paid to the airport, mainly because of the huge debt service that comes due next year for the first time for the $11.88 million bond issue that the airport borrowed. We finally bonded that in February of 2022. The first payment is due in February 2023. It's a huge amount. I want to say between $660,000, $680,000 a year. PFCs or passenger facility charges that have been allocated to pay for this don't come close to amounting to that much in any 1 year. So if the airport pays the difference out of airport operating fund, it's going to need a transfusion or a subsidy from the general fund. But I'm kind of stepping on Lisa's presentation that's coming in less than 3 weeks when she presents the budget to you. But as far as historically and right up through the end of 2021, there's been no general fund subsidy in their revenue stream from the general fund.
Okay, Lisa has her hand up real quick.
But one, I don't know if you'd call it a technicality, but the airport, the county has been subsidizing the airport by not charging the indirect costs to the airport over the past number of years. So
right.
We charge other departments or other enterprise funds for support by the county. We have not been charging the airport over the last.
Yeah, that's what I was referring to. Any other questions for Rick on this slide? Okay, go ahead, Rick. Sorry about that.
And my last slide is recycling, materials management. revenues of nearly $4 million, which are quite a bit higher than almost any other year. We're still less than the expenditures, the blue bar, which were $4.1 million. So there was a net loss also at recycling and material management to the tune of $151,000. That's not much of a loss. It could have gone either way. It's so close. It's about break even. So you can see revenues there growing nicely over the last 4 years or so. And you can see the expenditures, unfortunately, they've been really growing dramatically in 2021 and the current year, 2022. So fund balance as of the end of 2021 came in at $1.35 million. And that was down from $1.5 million the year before. And we are suddenly done. I could have given you more, but I am willing to take questions. If you have anything that you'd like me to explain in more detail. We normally go like 45 minutes, and Shauna told me to stick to 30 minutes. So I tried to put it all out there as quick as I could. Any questions?
Thank you, Rick. Let's see here. We have Randy Brown, and then there was another hand I saw. Deborah Dawson.
Yes, thank you, Rick, and congratulations on having your audit done and a clean audit as well, which is, I know what you wanted. Do we get a copy of this presentation? Is that what you emailed to us, or?
What I sent you was the 5 documents that consist of the financial report. I did already make this PowerPoint into a PDF, and immediately after this meeting, I'll send it to all legislators.
Thanks. And the only question I have is, obviously there's a lot of cash. I know there's restrictions on how cash is managed, but where does all the cash live? Is it in local banks? And I know you can't invest it like people invest money, but how is that managed?
We spread it out amongst all the local banks. There's 4 or 5 or 6 local banks everywhere from the biggest amount is with Tompkins Community Bank. And then we have money with Bank of Graton, and we have 4 or 5 different banks. They're all listed in our investment policy, which we renew each year with the legislature. And the only investments that we've had currently, and we want, now that Daryl's on board, we'd like to get a little bit more aggressive and get a better interest rate. But the only other than cash that we're in is typical money market and savings accounts.
With interest rates going up, it's maybe good to bid it out, right?
Well, it's good to look into. There's a few different investments that are very safe, like New York Class. We'll be trying to bring to you a recommendation to move a part of our reserves into New York Class, which is a New York State and NYSAC-backed pool that invests government funds in a safe but liquid environment, and their yields are moving up just as you would see in anything like the 3-month, the 6-month, the 1 year, the 2 year. The interest rates are really quite high right now, and we want to be able to develop some kind of investment scheme that will get a little bit of a bang for our buck for at least a portion of our reserves.
Thank you.
Hey, Deborah, Rich, and Greg.
Yeah, I'm curious, Rick, you hearken back to what our fund balance was in 2013. Do you happen to recall what our total county budget was in 2013? Just for context.
Let me see. I don't off the top of my head.
So Dan Klein says it was 140 million, and right now it's 200 million. So I just wanted to provide a little context to this radical increase in fund balance. Thank you.
Yeah. I have notes at the bottom of the slides, but they don't go back to the preceding years, but get that information for you. That sounds about right. I don't think Dan would ever put out anything that was wrong.
It was a guess, but you know.
Oh, it was a guess. Okay, all right.
It was a good guess.
Thanks, Dan. Rich John.
I wanted to start out by, again, as Randy said, thanking you for all the work on the audit. You know, our financial numbers look really good, and the fact that the auditors come back with an unqualified opinion is really important. And frankly, our bond rating is just excellent, and it takes a lot of work to make sure we stay there. I actually had a question for Lisa. You know, we've taken the position that trying to predict what the casino revenues are, and we're really conservative on our numbers. I'm wondering if you're reevaluating that with the trends we've had over the last 5 years, if we're going to go a little bit higher.
You bet.
Go big or go home, Lisa.
Did you say you bet?
My money is on her. Okay. Rich, do you have any other questions?
That was it.
I don't. Oh, I'm sorry. You're talking to Rich.
Go ahead, Rick.
No, I have nothing else for tonight, except that I want to really give credence and a really astounding attaboy, good job, well done to all my staff. This year has been an exceedingly tough year with people exiting the workplace and then getting new staff on board. And it couldn't, some of those changes as it happens right in the middle of audit season, it was very hard for us to work with. But, you know, Drew's there. Thank you, Drew. He muscled through a lot of this, some of the most difficult sections of the audit with the auditors. Daryl is new and he was on board. He helped fly spec every page of the final reports. And there's so many other staff members that have a part in one way or another, and they're all great. I say kudos to all of them. It's been great working with them. I told the auditors today for the first time, and I don't mind saying it here publicly, as you know, my retirement's coming up at the end of November, and I told the auditors for the first time, and they just couldn't believe it. I thought I'd wait to the end of the audit because, you know, I had to whip them, you know, to get it done. We didn't get the final draft until 2:30 today, and I didn't want to be a lame duck, you know, and say, I'm a finance director on the way out. What does he have to say? But they were really kind of shocked and surprised to hear that I would be leaving. That I believe they have at least one more year on their contract with you. And that audit team is robust and they have performed very, very well. If there were any downside to this past year, it was because of having so many new members on my staff having to deal with things for the first time. But I'm proud of this report. I think you see the Tompkins County finances have grown and in better shape than hardly any other county around. We can all be proud of Tompkins County and the wise budgeting decisions that you make with county administration. And I'm very glad to be able to have presented this tonight with no qualms, no bad news. And it'll be my last financial report to the Tompkins County Legislature.
Well, Rick Snyder, I hope you didn't speak too soon because we still have 3 more legislators that have questions.
Okay.
Greg, Mike Lane, and Annie.
Yeah. So again, first, Rick, thanks to you and your team. I hope that this was a good experience in learning. I hope that in future years we can maybe have this information slightly sooner, not to rain on a positive parade. But I do think that, you know, hopefully the learnings from this can inform future audits and future closes so that we can get information as soon as possible. But thank you for the work and it's great news. I also just want to remind folks where revenue comes from, right? Taxpayers, people who decide to transact and do business in our community, people who decide to live and own property in our community, and some of those other things. So appreciate those folks out there who made the investment in Tompkins County, right? Through deciding to spend their money here, to shop locally, to do those things, to live locally. Because without them, we wouldn't have revenue and we wouldn't be in the position that we're in. I also think it's important because we see a lot of great positive numbers and big percentage changes. But I think that there's some things maybe on the horizon that it's just one piece of the puzzle that we're talking about right now. And I think we should be cautious as we go into the budget season. As a proponent of spending down some fund balance and reinvesting that into our community, I think we need to wait till Lisa and Norma present their budget before we make too many assumptions. A few of us had the opportunity to get I'll call it a budget primer from Norma, which would like to thank her for that and her time, but really eye-opening. So we've seen big growth. We've seen some big numbers, but I also think we have some big expense and some big challenges still ahead. So just want to caution everybody, while it is a rosy picture that's painted tonight, that those pictures can change relatively quickly, and we should still approach this with the same diligence that we do in a downtime, because that gives us the ability to sort of weather through the highs and lows of our cycle. So Rick, again, thank you very much. Lisa, we look forward to what's to come, and we know that there's challenges in the budget, and also look for creative ways to recommit services and investment back into the community. So I'm excited for budget season and spending more time with you.
That's awesome.
And you too, Deborah.
You need to get out more, Greg.
Okay, so let's see here. I have 4 people and just a time check. It's 7:45 right now. I think I'm seeing some people that probably need to take a little bit of a break very soon. So why don't we go through our 4 people? Mike Lane, Ann, Lisa, I think Lisa was going to actually, okay. Mike Lane, Ann, Lisa, and Deb.
I'll try to be short, but I wanted to say, Rick, I always look forward to these presentations each year that you give to us, especially after hearing the audit. Audits tend to be awfully dry, but you have a way of bringing forth figures, anticipating the kind of questions that we have in our mind. You do it with grace and with enthusiasm. You obviously like figures. And that's a really important thing for our CFO. Thank you. We're going to miss you.
Thank you, Mike.
Thank you.
Ann Corman.
Thank you, Madam Chair. A lot of what I was going to say was already said, but just suffice to say, I wanted to thank Rick, for the last big financial report. You, as folks said, you do make it, especially with the charts and the graphs, and so I do appreciate that. It makes it really digestible for us. I hope also, as far as transparency, I do believe that makes it more transparent to the community, as Legislator Mezzi said, to think about where that money comes from, and you help make that more digestible to the community, where it comes from, where their money comes from when they're visiting, living, or working here, and then where it goes to our needed services. So thank you for this. And I don't want to preempt, but possibly we're going to move the resolution to accept the report, but I see Deborah's hand up, so maybe she'll do that. But thank you very much, Rick.
Welcome.
Thank you, Annie, Lisa, and then Deborah.
I too want to thank Rick for the presentation, and I can attest to the time that he and his staff put into the audit. It's a great amount of time. I just wanted to very briefly add a couple of just a little bit of context for how and why the $16 million in savings occurred in 2022 or 2020 at the end of 2021, because I think that context is important. The 2021 budget was put together in the midst of COVID in in the summer and fall of 2020. In an era of uncertainty at that time. And in that time, in 2020, there were mid-year reductions totaling $5.8 million mid-year 2020. And then in terms of putting together the 2021 budget, our colleges were still closed down. The economy was closed down. It was pretty unprecedented time. Our sales taxes plummeted locally. And Tompkins County lost more in sales tax revenue in 2020 than any other upstate county. So in forecasting for 2021, and I wasn't at the helm at the time, it was Jason, but Jason and Molino and the county legislature determined to forecast very conservatively for 2021 because no one knew how much of an extent our economy would rebound. As it turns out, in 2021, our economy rebounded, and I think we had the greatest increase in sales tax revenue of any upstate county. So we were very, very fortunate. But in the meantime, in response to that, we had instituted a hiring freeze, a spending freeze. We furloughed 100 employees, and in the 2021 budget, we reduced our roster by 47 employees. So many other spending freezes were put together and enacted at that time. So I'm very pleased to say that to see the outcome of all of these efforts, and also in the meantime, the federal government, there was much federal assistance in terms of enhanced unemployment and eviction moratorium supports to businesses and so forth, which created much fewer mandates than expected, mandated cost of services that Rick pointed to in terms of our DSS expenses. That could have gone very much the other way as well. So all in all, we were very, very fortunate in terms of the pandemic taking the turn that it did, the federal supports that helped us, the sales tax rebounding, our colleges being able to return. But it might not have turned out that way. And I just wanted to add that context.
Thank you, Lisa. Deborah?
Yeah, just in case anyone's going to go check, I beat them to it. The Tompkins County budget for 2013 was 164 million. So close, but no cigar, Dan Klein.
Thank you. Thanks for checking.
And with your permission, Shauna, to celebrate Rick's presentation and the fine audit results that we got, I'd like to move Resolution E, acceptance of audited financial report for the fiscal year ended December 31, 2021.
Great. And seconded by Lee Shirtliff. And any further discussion? I see none. Let's do a roll call vote.
Randy Brown,
Yes.
Deborah Dawson,
Yes.
Henry Granison,
Yes.
Rich John,
Yes.
Dan Klein,
Yes.
Ann Corman,
Yes.
Mike Lane,
Yes.
Greg Mezzi,
Yes.
Veronica Pillar,
Yes.
Lee Shirtliff,
Yes.
Mike Sigler,
Yes.
Travis Brooks,
Yes.
Shauna Black,
Yes.
13 ayes, 0 noes.
Thank you, everyone. And thank you, Rick and Drew and staff.
Thank you.
Okay, let's go ahead and take a break. And it's 7:52, and why don't we come back at 8 o'clock?
Magic doesn't it? Yeah.
I'm looking for my appointment. Okay, here it is. Okay, let's move forward with our consent agenda. Are there any resolutions to be added or withdrawn from the agenda? See none. The consent agenda is resolutions and appointments to be voted on as a group unless any member of the legislature requests that a resolution or appointment be instead included separately and individually as part of the business of standing or special committees. I have one agenda appointment, Environment Management Council, David Wolf, Town of Lansing Representative, and the term expires December 31st, 2022. Health and Human Services Committee, Resolution A, authorization to increase hours, senior account clerk typist, Health Department, ID 11024. Government Operations Committee, Resolution B, termination of the Town of Covert Shared Services Agreement, ID 11057. Budget, Capital, and Personnel Committee, Resolution C, award of contract for Tompkins County Compensation Study, ID 11069. Resolution D, reappointment of Tompkins County Commissioner of Social Services, 5-year term, ID 11055. And can I have a mover, please? Moved by Veronica Pillar, seconded by Deborah Dawson. And we'll do a roll call vote.
Randy Brown,
Yes.
Deborah Dawson,
Yes.
Henry Granison,
Yes.
Rich John,
Yes.
Dan Klein,
Yes.
Ann Corman,
Yes.
Mike Lane,
Yes.
Greg Mezzi,
Yes.
Veronica Pillar,
Yes.
Lee Shirtliff,
Yes.
Mike Sigler,
Yes.
Travis Brooks,
Yes.
Shauna Black.
Yes.
We have 13 ayes, 0 nos.
Thank you. Next is our standing and special committees. Time for reports. Workforce Diversity and Inclusion Committee, Henry Granison, Chair.
Yes, the committee has not met since the last legislative meeting, so I really have no report.
Thank you, Henry. Public Safety Committee, Rich John, Chair.
The Public Safety Committee will be meeting this Thursday. I anticipate a report from Angela Sullivan from the Drug and Alcohol Council on status of the detox facility, how that's coming along. And we'll be talking about a lot of other interesting items. That meeting is August 18th at 3 o'clock. The only other item I'd mention is our jail numbers are at 42 with 1 board out.
Any questions for Rich John? Okay. Health and Human Services Committee, Dan Klein, Chair.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have a report. I'll send the clerks a copy of this report. The Health and Human Services Committee met yesterday and we had 2 big presentations and discussions. The first was from Melissa Perry, CEO of the Child Development Council. Child Development Council is a resource and referral agency for both Tompkins and Cortland counties. We learned about various ways the council is trying to increase the number of childcare slots and also support the current providers. The county funds one of their staff members whose title is the Building Access to Childcare Specialist. That person helps home-based commercial childcare providers with business training and navigating government regulations. We were also told about 3 planned expansions of existing large childcare providers in Tompkins County. These projects have already received funds from the New York State Regional Economic Development Council and are seeking more money to be able to complete these infrastructure projects. Then we had another presentation about the TIDES proposal. TIDES stands for the Ithaca Dedicated Encampment Site and can be described as a proposal to build 25 cabins and a community building in the area behind Walmart. There were many specific questions asked and much discussion about the content of the proposal, but I will only report here on the process. The mayor recently released an 8-point work plan that would roll out over the next 7 months to prepare the city to be able to make its final decision about how to address the homelessness and encampment issues. This work plan contains some specific asks from the county. Let me read you the one that would require the most immediate response on our part. Quote, hire an enhanced housing navigator in conjunction with Tompkins County and others. Continuum of Care's homeless and housing needs assessment recommended funding of enhanced housing navigator services to reduce chronic homelessness. The navigator can provide intensive case management, help unsheltered homeless individuals navigate the process to access services and shelter, and overcome barriers to enter and sustain housing, unquote. To be clear, the mayor and common council have not yet settled on a plan. Everything so far that we've received are just proposals. One of the key decisions that they will need to make is whether to issue an RFP, a request for proposals, or an RFEI, a request for expressions of interest. An RFP would more or less be seeking proposals on how to build something like tides. An RFEI would more or less be asking for broader proposals of how to address the homelessness and encampment situation. The City of Ithaca Fire Chief, Tom Parsons, was present at our meeting. He stated that he supports the tides proposal. Meanwhile, our committee agreed that the next step for us, the county, is to have our county administrator convene a meeting of all department heads who would have a role in these proposals. They will closely examine all that is being asked of us to see what impact this would have on our departments. By my count, we have received 24 pages of documents about this with 58 mentions of the word county. So that's a lot to respond to. They will also be exploring whether a focus more centered on mental health treatment might be a better direction for the county to put its resources in. Our county administrator will report back to the Health and Human Services Committee next month on the outcome of that meeting. And I invite Lisa to add anything else she might want to say about this upcoming process.
Thank you, Dan. Lisa?
I have nothing further to add, Dan. I think you covered it. Thank you.
And also, if anybody from the committee wanted to add anything that, obviously we covered a lot of ground and I can't report on it all.
So my assumption is that this will be a much bigger conversation at some point. Is that right, Dan?
So, if I had to chart out what might happen next is that departments are going to talk and figure some stuff out from their end, report back to Health and Human Services. That might be the end of the line right there, or we might, take another step from there. Meanwhile, the city's got its process. And at some point, if we're both still interested, the two parties are going to have to come together to jointly start meeting. So that's quite a few steps away. That's how I see it.
Okay. Any questions for Dan? Deb Dawson?
Yeah, one of the things I found puzzling, I wasn't able to attend your meeting in real time, but I did watch it. When we talk about an RFEI, say we go that route, I know the city is trying to decide whether to do an RFP or an RFEI. Would we do two separate RFEIs or would we do a joint RFEI? How would that work? Or have you not gotten that far?
Well, we definitely, this is just me talking. The city surprised me in a good way by saying, we're going to do the RFEI or the RFP. Like they seem like they want to take responsibility for it. I happen to think that's a good thing. Maybe other people don't. So it wouldn't be us. Now, might they ask us for help, funding it? Maybe, I don't know. Or preparing it, I don't know.
Well, but that's where it gets really confusing because if the city does an RFEI or an RFP and the response entails a significant contribution of resources from the county in terms of staff and other things, I don't see how the city's decision on its own RFEI could in any way bind the county.
So the reason that I want us to huddle among ourselves and really address whether this is something we can do and what the impacts are is so that we can go to the city and say, okay, if you're going out with this RFP, this is the things we might be able to agree to. These are the things we cannot do, some version of that to inform them. That's why I feel like we need to huddle next. And
that makes sense. Ourselves. Thank you, Dan.
Any other question or comment for Dan? Rich?
I would just note that we all got a letter from a constituent who lives in Nate's Floral Estates. And if you haven't read it, I really think it is worth the time and attention.
Thank you. And I think we've actually received a few of them today, 2 or 3 maybe. So, okay, I know there's more discussion to be had on this topic, and probably every single one of us sitting around this table can agree we need to do something. I'm guessing we just all have different ideas as to how to help the issue. So sure it'll be engaging and a fun discussion. Any other questions or comments for Dan Klein? Okay, thanks, Dan. Oh, you have oh, nope, you don't have a resolution. It was on consent. Facilities and Infrastructure Committee, Mike Lane, Chair.
We'll be meeting this Thursday, August 18th at 9:00 a.m. Among other discussions, we will be talking about the Red House.
That's fun. Any questions for Mike Lane? Okay, thanks, Mike. Government Operations Committee, Amanda Champion, Chair, who is not with us tonight. Greg Mezzi, would you mind reporting, Vice Chair?
Yeah, absolutely. Our last meeting was on Thursday, August the 4th at noon. Many of the topics discussed by our assessment department were covered in that meeting. While we had robust discussion, it was not a robust agenda. So most of the items covered we see on our agenda here tonight. So nothing additional to report except our next GO meeting, Government Operations, is September 1st at noon.
Any questions for Greg? Thank you, Greg. Next, Planning, Development and Environmental Quality Committee, Ann Corman, Chair.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I know I've been having trouble with my computer microphone. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, very good.
Okay, didn't mean to make you spit out your coffee or water, whatever that is. Thank you. So we have not met since our last legislature meeting. We do have a meeting coming up next Monday. So thank you, our clerk, Brittany Grape, for writing up our agenda. So that's Monday, the 22nd, 1:30. And it's fairly light agenda. We have a report from Ithaca Area Economic Development. Let's see, we have a resolution to cover some additional expenses at the Workforce Development's new office. And we have a broadband update and a small budget adjustment from tourism. So pretty light, and that's all I have.
Okay, thank you, Ann. Any questions for Ann Corman? Okay, next is Community Recovery Fund Advisory Committee, Dan Klein, Chair.
Thank you. Our next meeting is going to be on Wednesday, the 24th at 10:30. And we're meeting then because we were scheduled to meet on Labor Day. So we're having 2 meetings this month. Assuming we pass the guidelines, then the fund will be launched at that point. The assembled draft guidelines are out. In other words, the ones that, based on all the responses we gave at our first meeting, so anyone can take a look at that. And this would be a good time to comment on it if you have any concerns at all, because there's a good chance next Wednesday we'll finalize it.
Any other questions for Dan Klein or comments? Okay, thank you, Dan. Next, we have the Budget, Capital and Personnel Committee, Deborah Dawson, Chair.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We met last Monday, and the main topic of our meeting was the auditors came from Insero and went through the audit report for us. Other than that, we have Resolution F, Tompkins County Salary and Retroactive Budget Adjustment for Civil Service Employees Association, Inc., Local 1000, AFSCME, AFL-CIO, Tompkins County Local 855, Tompkins County White Collar Unit 8900 CSEA, ID number 11060, and I move that.
Thank you. Seconded by Rich John. And discussion?
Yeah, this is just retroactive Well, we've been paying, as I understand it, we've been paying the new salaries under the new collective bargaining agreement all year. This is just to move the money to cover those payments.
Thank you. Any discussion? Okay, let's do a roll call vote.
Randy Brown,
Yes.
Deborah Dawson,
Yes.
Henry Grandison,
Yes.
Rich John,
Yes.
Dan Klein,
Yes.
Ann Corman,
Yes.
Mike Lane,
Yes.
Greg Mezzi,
Yes.
Veronica Pillar,
Yes.
Lee Shirtliff,
Yes.
Mike Sigler,
Yes.
Travis Brooks,
Yes.
Shauna Black,
Yes.
13 ayes, 0 noes.
Thank you. Anything else, Deb? Okay, thank you. Any individual member filed resolutions? I see none. Can I have a mover for the minutes of our previous meeting, August 2nd, 2022, moved by Veronica Pillar, seconded by Randy Brown? Any discussion? Okay, let's do a roll call.
Randy Brown,
Yes.
Deborah Dawson,
Yes.
Henry Grandison,
Yes.
Rich John,
Yes.
Dan Klein,
Yes.
Ann Corman,
Yes.
Mike Lane,
Yes.
Greg Mezzi,
Yes.
Veronica Pillar,
Yes.
Lee Shirtliff,
Yes.
Mike Sigler,
Yes.
Travis Brooks,
Yes.
Shauna Black,
Yes.
13 ayes, 0 noes.
Thank you. Next on our agenda, we do have some unfinished business from our previous meeting. And I will let Dan Klein take that up.
Thank you. So last month, we had a long discussion about the dental building, and I made the case that the building was maybe an old wrinkled tube of toothpaste, but there was still some toothpaste in there. We could squeeze some life out of that thing, but I was wrong. The building is further deteriorated than I was leading everyone to believe. We had the rainstorm last week and quite a bit of water was coming in, and we would need to put a roof on that thing immediately at a cost of almost $1 million before we even know what we were doing with it. So I apologize for leading us down that false alley. I don't know. And so I would like to make a motion to reconsider the appropriation from the contingent fund to deconstruct the property located at 412, 414 North Tioga Street, City of Ithaca, former Baker Dental Building. So moved.
Seconded by Greg Mezzi. And discussion. Okay, go ahead, Greg.
Just procedural inquiry.
Mhm.
The motion is to reconsider. So if the motion passes, then the as adopted resolution would be up for discussion, and then it would have to be amended essentially, correct?
We have to amend it with the new seeker
You'd have to,
information as well.
okay.
So we would have to move it essentially. Is that correct, Kathy?
If the motion to reconsider is approved, it puts the resolution back on the table for consideration, discussion, and a vote. But I would ask that an amendment be made before that vote to correct the seeker action for the resolution.
Just want to make sure we're all.
Thank you. Yep.
So will we do that tonight?
Yes, if the motion to reconsider passes, yes.
Thank you, Kathy.
Okay, any other discussion? Okay, let's roll call vote.
Randy Brown,
Yes.
Deborah Dawson,
Yes.
Henry Grandison,
Yes.
Rich John,
Yes.
Dan Klein,
Yes.
Ann Corman,
Yes.
Mike Lane,
Yes.
Greg Mezzi,
Yes.
Veronica Pillar,
Yes.
Lee Shirtliff,
Yes.
Mike Sigler,
Yes.
Travis Brooks,
You were muted, Travis.
Yes.
Shauna Black.
Yes.
13 ayes, 0 noes.
Thank you.
No, the resolution can be discussed if you wish, or if you're ready to bring forward an amendment to change the seeker, that would be
Okay.
appropriate too.
Okay, so is there any further discussion? We would also need someone to bring forward an amendment to change the seeker. Deborah Dawson?
Yes. I mean, Kathy knows what it's supposed to say. So whatever she says, that's what I'm moving.
It's included in your agenda packet. Packet. Packet page 56. It would be the new second whereas and changing the seeker action to unlisted.
So I would move to amend the resolution to track the language on page 56 of our agenda packet.
And Veronica Pillar would second. Any discussion on the amendment? Okay, I see none. We're voting on the amendment. Is that right? Yep.
Okay. Randy Brown,
Yes.
Deborah Dawson,
Yes.
Henry Grandison,
Yes.
Rich John,
Yes.
Dan Klein,
Yes.
Ian Corman,
Yes.
Mike Lane,
Yes.
Greg Mezzi,
Yes.
Veronica Pillar,
Yes.
Lee Shirtliff, Mike Sigler,
Yes.
Travis Brooks,
Yes.
Shauna Black.
Yes.
We have 12 ayes, 0 noes.
Thank you. Now we have the resolution with the amendment on the table. And is there any discussion? Okay, let's vote on this.
Randy Brown,
Yes.
Deborah Dawson,
Yes.
Henry Grandison,
Yes.
Rich John,
Yes.
Dan Klein,
Yes.
Ann Corman,
Yes.
Mike Lane,
No.
Greg Mezzi,
Yes.
Veronica Pillar,
Yes.
Lee Shirtliff,
Please say yes.
Lee, we're voting on the resolution.
Yes.
Mike Sigler,
Yes.
Travis Brooks,
Yes.
Shauna Black.
Yes,
We have 12 ayes, 1 no.
that passes. Thank you all. And let's see here. Next, we are, if we could go into executive session for purposes of discussing contract negotiations. I expect that we will not take action. Moved by Deborah Dawson, seconded by Randy Brown.
You suspect or we won't?
We will not take action. Nope, not tonight. And let's do a roll call vote, please.
Randy Brown, Deborah Dawson,
Yes.
Henry Grandison,
Yes.
Rich John,
Yes.
Dan Klein,
Yes.
Ann Corman,
Yes.
Mike Lane,
Yes.
Greg Mezzi,
Yes.
Veronica Pillar,
Yes.
Lee Shirtliff,
Yes.
Mike Sigler,
Yes.
Travis Brooks,
Yes.
Shauna Black,
Yes.
13 ayes, 0 noes.
Thank you. And why don't we take a 2-3 minute break and turn off media? And then we will meet for executive session. Good night, Rick. Thank you.
Welcome.
Rob, let me know in the chat when you want me to join audio with this computer.